compute. Recording in progress. Okay. So, you know what? I'm going to change the view. Okay. So I read a Gallup poll that was a little bit shocking. The average of 69% of people feel they lack the self-confidence to achieve their potential. Is drawn from two cohorts, and I did the fancy math. It's 59% of men feel that they lack the self-confidence to achieve their potential, and it's 79% of women feel they lack the self-confidence to fulfill their potential. And so I wanted to do this webinar with you today to beat those odds. Whether you're a man or a woman, those, we're not talking very high probability here. And I want to equip you all with tools to really strengthen your self-confidence so you get what you want out of life. So I want to talk first of all about what happens when you don't have self-confidence. And sometimes I know this is changing, and I'm super glad it's changing. Sometimes people think, or women think, that showing too much self-confidence is kind of arrogant, and it leans towards arrogance. And certainly it can, but the self-confidence I'm talking about is what we call grounded self-confidence. And not only is it a realistic view of your competences and your abilities, but it's also grounded in the fact that you are competent. So there's this phenomenon, I'm sure you know of it, is fake it till you make it. And we're not talking about that today. We're talking about real grounded self-confidence based on your abilities and your competences. And if you don't have self-confidence, what happens is you don't really show your competences. In fact, what happens if you don't have self-confidence overall, in sum, can be reduced to you stay small. You stay small in life, you stay stuck, and you don't go for what you want. And what does that mean more specifically? Well, in broad strokes, it will mean you don't get the job you want. You don't get the job you want because you don't apply for the job you want. You don't throw your ring in for the promotion. You don't ask for the raise that you deserve. Especially women are known to have this problem, not to ask for the money that is equated to their value. You don't ask that cutie out on a date and meet, the partner of your life. So those are the broad strokes of staying small because of a lack of self-confidence. But the lack of self-confidence can also manifest in smaller and more subtle ways that are in a way just as detrimental to your success. So one example of lacking self-confidence is you won't speak up in meetings. You won't, if you're working on a project and everyone is really, here's someone else. And so if you're working on a project and everyone is really gung-ho about direction X, and you think, wait a second, I think direction Y would be a smarter direction, would get us more success, but you don't speak up. And so no one even knows that there is direction Y, and you go down direction X, and then lo and behold, it doesn't get the great results that your ideas for direction Y might have gotten you. You don't do that presentation that will gain you visibility within your organization, or also that will be of value to other people. So one of the other detriments of not living with self-confidence is that you don't give people what you have to offer them. And so they lose out by not seeing what you have to show. So self-confidence really, when it's grounded in competence, is a win. I'm going to take my glasses off. It's a win for everyone. And when you have self-confidence, well, it's the opposite of the life without self-confidence. You, at the very least, apply for the job you want. You put your hand up for that promotion. You make yourself visible. You finally meet the person that's right for you. So you get the life that you, or at least you make it possible to get the life that you envision for yourself. And then again, in the meetings, in the presentations, in the projects, suddenly your voice has that power. So the life of confidence, when it's grounded in competence, will get you really far. Now, what is the difference? Can anyone tell me between this sort of grounded confidence and a fake it till you make it confidence? Does anyone have any ideas? Anita, please.
I think with fake it till you make it, you don't embody it. And maybe your body language will give you away, because it's like, and there, you might play the role as being a confident person, but there would be like, something in either their gestures or the facial expression that would kind of like make people realize that you are not what you say you are.
Well, there's that. There's those little glitches in it. But I think, so what's really interesting is that the research shows that fake self-confidence is as convincing as real self-confidence. So if you are a good actor and you can bring confidence across, it'll work. And that's why, to some degrees, fake it till you make it is not bad advice if that's your only recourse. The problem with fake it till you make it is that it leads to burnout, because there will always be this disjuncture between what you're projecting and what you're feeling inside. And when there's ever this dissociation, then it creates a stress in your system that is long-term unsustainable. So that's why we want the self-confidence that's real, that's part of us. So how do I know about self-confidence? If you don't know me that well, I'll tell you something about myself, about my trajectory and how I've gained confidence through experience. When I was 27 years old, I threw up a promising academic career in Canada, and I went to follow my dreams of being European. I followed my German boyfriend back to Berlin. And we had a very strong relationship for the duration of that relationship. And when it came to an end, I said, you know what? I am not ready to go back to Canada. Certainly not with my tail between my legs. I'm going to stay here and build a life for myself. And I got an opportunity to start my own business. It just sort of fell into my lap and it went forward. And I built a business working in Germany and in German for well over 10 years. And as a woman in a foreign country, in a foreign language, running your own business, I'll use that term that's not really politically correct, it takes balls. And I did it. And in that time, I was also a fundraiser for an international arts project called No Borders Orchestra. And I went, in the service of that, I was fundraiser and communication advisor. In a service of that, I went to, London to negotiate with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. We negotiated 2 collaborations. Anita, you would know about them because they're active in the East. I got a very generous donation from the German Foreign Ministry. I negotiated funds from embassies in the Balkans with Raiffeisen Bank. I was really active, and all of that took this self-confidence. Did I know what I was doing? Not really, but I did it anyway. Yeah, and it was a learning by doing, and it was a wonderful experience. And at the end of those achievements, the self-confidence that I went into, or that I had going into it, only increased because I saw the results of the actions based on self-confidence. So I know that. I also know what happens when you don't have self-confidence. And I think how it manifested for me in the examples that I gave is that I was often someone who had ideas a little bit outside the box and a little bit different from what sort of the average idea was, so what everyone else had. And I did speak up and I saw the results. I said, hey, maybe it would have been better with my ideas. And when I started expressing my ideas, it wasn't that they were always, taken with gusto, but they were certainly integrated into the projects. And that led to more success and more visibility for myself, because I was expressing myself without fear, maybe a little bit of fear and apprehension, but certainly with some courage. So in this webinar, we're going to be talking about self-confidence. And what we're not going to talk about is self-esteem, which is slightly different. I was wondering, can anyone tell me the difference between self-confidence and self-esteem? What do you think? Anyone, you could also put it in the chat if that's more convenient for you. So the difference between self-confidence and self-esteem is that self-confidence is the positive regard you have for your self-esteem is internal. Exactly, Sarah, thank you. That's what I'm getting to. Yeah. So self-confidence is the positive regard you have for your confidence, your competences, and your abilities and your skills in the world. So it's how you show up in the world and you think what I have to offer has value. So you have a positive regard for what you put out in the world. And self-esteem is more internal, or someone else once said intrinsic. It's the positive regard you have for yourself, your internal value as a human being, regardless of your behavior, your actions, your competences and skills in the world. So self-esteem is more fundamental. It predates a little bit your self-confidence. And that has a lot to do with your early childhood development. And we're not going to talk about that today because the topic is too vast and it's also too personal, too particular to each person. We're going to be focusing on the more social aspect of the positive regard for self, which is the self-confidence. And of course, that is influenced by your experiences, by your family of origin and all that. I'm not, again, going to touch on that too much because it's particular to each individual and it's too vast for this short webinar, relatively short webinar. But I do want to talk about the evolutionary basis of our negative thinking, because I think we tend to conclude that we're the only ones who have negative self-talk. Everyone else is out there super confident. They feel really, they have a sense of belonging in their group, and they're just functioning at top positivity all the time. Most of those people will have also negative thinking going on. It's part of being human, and I'm going to explain why. There's noise in someone's background. If I could just ask you to put on mute for now, unless you have something to say, that'd be really helpful, just if you notice. So what is the background of our negative thinking? Okay, well, back in prehistoric times when the Homo sapien brain was forming, the natural world was fraught with danger. It was an unfriendly place for men and women. Okay, so the men had to go out hunting with these big mammoth animals with the huge tusks. If there was a resource war, it was the men who went out and fought them. Your life was constantly in a kind of peril for survival. And it wasn't much easier if you were a woman, because if you were the gatherer, part of the hunter-gatherer tribe, you would have to go out into a natural world that was equally dangerous. If you were going after herbs, you would have to get, the herbs that are healthy and that add to a meal versus the poisonous herbs. And they might look almost exactly alike, but the poisonous herb has 5 little spikes coming out, and the tasty, delicious, healthy one has 4. And so you had to be really careful looking at each leaf. The same thing with mushrooms. What are the mushrooms that are good for you? What are the ones that will kill you, et cetera, et cetera. And, while you're going looking, you have to make sure that you don't step on a poisonous spider or wake up a snake. And as you bend down to pick up the delicious berries, make sure that a tiger doesn't come jumping over the bushes. So everyone was afraid. And that was a survival mechanism. If you didn't have fear, if you just went blithely through the world, hey, nothing's going to happen to me, that was the end of the story for you. So our brains are hardwired to wonder where the next danger is coming from. So you're not alone. That is the human brain doing what it is supposed to do. Now, my question to you is, what is the human being's greatest fear? In the chat, or feel free to unmute if you like. What is our greatest fear? To not belong? Can you get a little bit shame? Public? Yes. Okay. Right. So public shame. The greatest fear of human beings is to be excluded from the group, is to be expelled from the group. So I think, Anita, that's where you were going, because that's what happens with public shame. And that has the similar root cause as what I was describing before of, the natural world being fraught with peril. Because in prehistoric times, if you were excluded from the group, if you were sent out, that was as good as a death sentence, because you couldn't get clothing, you couldn't get food, you couldn't get shelter if you were alone. And you were subject to all the dangers that you can have protection from in a group. So our brains are wired to fear social exclusion. Fast forward to the 21st century, and here we're in a state, what happens? We're all supposed to be amazing individuals, right? But that need to belong or fit in is still with us. The brain is still operating in that way. But the need to be an individual is so, especially if you're in North America, is so strong that there's this real friction between those two drives. And I would argue that what has happened is that the way that we fit in today's society is based on this alienated state that we've gotten into by being such a large society that is disconnected from our neighbor, that we don't have these immediate relationships that we did previously in hunter-gatherer tribes or in villages. It's all very large, overwhelming. And so we're given instead these images that we should conform to, but that don't necessarily relate to us as who we are in our individual needs. And no one is asking us. We're being told, be like this. So if you're a youngish, let's say a millennial in today's Western society, it's go to the gym 5 times a week. Start a startup, be super cool, and be the individual and perform, achieve. That's the highest good. But does that correspond to who you are as a person? So that's where we've gone. And I think it creates a lot of insecurity in us, because these images we're being told to conform to don't respond to our basic needs, both on a general level, but also on a particular level. Who are you? Who are you specifically? And what do you need? And every person has a different range of needs and desires that can't be satisfied by a one-size-fits-all image of success. And so this is a good way to transition to our paradigm shift. What is the paradigm shift to have grounded self-confidence today? I would argue, instead of trying to fit in, which is the very typical road that people go down. If I act like everyone else, I'll be able to show up, proudly with my chin up and take my space. And I would say, let's move away from fitting in. It might be necessary sometimes, but let's move away from that and go into self-awareness. And the paradigm shift that I advocate is to be aware of who you are, your strengths and weaknesses, your desires and aversions, your boundaries and limitations, but also just your more particular feelings and thoughts and values per different situations. And not only to be self-aware of all that, but also to accept it, to have self-acceptance. I would say that self-awareness and self-acceptance are the bedrock to grounded self-confidence. Now, that requires, of course, inner work. I'm aware of that. I'm aware that self-awareness and self-acceptance, you don't just say, okay, now I'm totally fine being the person that I am. But I would say if you're going to set any goals for yourself, please include that one, even if it takes time and it takes work, because that's the basis really for a fulfilled life, I would say. And that is the segue to the 5 techniques that I want to share with you to strengthen your self-confidence on a regular basis. So before we begin talking about 5 techniques, I want you to think of a number of 1 to 5, any number, and keep it for yourself for now. It's not a huge thing. There's no card trick. You're not going to win a prize. Just think of a number from 1 to 5, and now we're going to go on. So, thanks, Sarah. The first technique for strengthening your self-confidence, I would say, is to be the arbiter of who you are. You are the judge and the decider of who you are, not other people. And anyone who's gone away from home and come back might have that experience, as I have, that you were one person when you left and you came back and you were another person, and the people you knew previously might be trying to tell you, oh, well, you're this person, and they'll do it in subtle ways. They won't give you a card and say this is who you are. And I think it's very important for you to have that internal sense of like, wait a second, not only are you wrong about who I am, but I'm the one who decides. So this becomes very clear if you've had this big break of going away and coming back, but it can also happen just in your natural development. And it's very important that you give yourself the right to say, I decide who I am. I'm trying to think if I want to share the example with you that I was thinking about this morning. It's so strange, but I remember a few years ago, I was with my brothers and some family friends. And for those of you who don't know me, Adrian, you'll know this. I have 3 older brothers, and they're innumerable. So with their friends, it's like I have innumerable older brothers. It gets really to be a lot. And we were all together, and I was putting some wine in the fridge, and a friend of a brother that I've known my entire life, who will remain nameless, tried to tell me that I didn't know how to do basic things like put a bottle of wine in the fridge. And yeah, and I turned around and I made it clear in no uncertain terms, because I've been putting bottles of wine into fridges for a very long time. Putting a bottle of wine into a fridge, no matter how full or how empty, is something I'm really good at doing. And I let him know, because that was very important for me that I didn't play the flighty little sister role. Oh, I don't know how to do anything. And I said, wait a second, no, I'm really competent at a few things, including putting wine in the fridge. And so I set down that boundary, which is number 2. So I'm the one who decides who I am, how I've grown, what I can do. And number two is I put down the boundary. And putting down boundaries, to quote Brene Brown, who's a thought leader from the US, is I let people know what's okay and not okay. It is not okay to treat me as if I don't know how to do things. It is totally okay to joke around with me afterwards in a way that we've agreed is fine. This is an okay zone. And that's no problem. But to undermine my abilities to get through daily life is not okay for me. Because there's too much baggage, there's too much background, and that's not a joke that I find okay. And that became clear. So be the arbiter of who you are, and that manifests itself with others in being able to put down boundaries. Now, there's a lot of talk about boundaries these days. If you're like me and you're in the sort of personal growth space, you'll see a lot of memes and videos and this and that about putting down boundaries. And although I think it's a really important topic, and I'm glad that it's getting a lot of airtime, I find the way it's propagated sometimes to be questionable, because very often you'll see, especially in Instagram videos, that I'm so glad I deleted Instagram. It'll be a sort of a zero-sum game. It's, if you don't treat me the way that I want to be treated, I'm breaking the relationship and I'm out of here. And putting down boundaries doesn't always have to be that extreme. You can communicate what's okay and not okay and maintain the relationship anyway. And that can come across in the words you use, but also your tone of voice, your posture, and the eye contact that you make. So all these things can be used to assert the boundary, but also to maintain the relationship. And if you're able to maintain eye contact, that's a really good way of expressing, I'm putting down a boundary here. This is not okay to go past this point. And the Germans have an expression, bis hier und nicht weiter, until here and no further. But I still want to maintain the contact with you. And one way to maintain the connection that I think is so important, and now we get to technique number 3, is to act in a spirit of generosity. Assert your boundaries, but from your boundaries, be generous. An example of that could be if you have decided in your life that you want a work-life balance. There are some people, I know it might resonate with one participant in this webinar, who are willing to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week because they love what they do. That's great for them. And another person might say, I want to work 40 hours a week and I want to fulfill myself professionally. And then I want to say Feierabend, it's the end of the day, and I have my private life. Okay, so that's a boundary. You're putting down 40 hours, but within those 40 hours, do your best. Don't go over your own personal boundaries and limitations, but give, contribute, be available. And that's how you stay in that dance, right, of going back from this individuality, I decide who I am, and here are my boundaries, and please respect them, to saying, but the connection is important to me, and I maintain the connection with you, and here's how. So you are the arbiter of who you are. You put down boundaries, and you act in a spirit of generosity. And all of this, when you're acting in that spirit of generosity, this also contributes to your self-confidence, because you see that you're a valuable member of whatever cohort this happens to apply to. Now, these are sort of internal exercises that you can do with yourself, and there are ways of sort of monitoring yourself to ensure that you keep with it. The fourth technique for strengthening your self-confidence becomes very practical. I'm just going to take a glass of water. I'm going to take a sip of water, and I'll be with you in a second. So the fourth technique for strengthening your self-confidence is to set achievable goals for yourself on a regular basis. and turn things that seem to be just like your day-to-day life into goals. Because once you achieve those manageable goals, you will be able to internalize the image of yourself as someone who gets things done, who achieves their goals. So I have a couple of examples for you. Let's say in a work context, you have to write a report by, let's say, next Friday. You don't really like writing reports. A lot of people don't like writing reports. It must be done. Okay, how do you motivate yourself? Well, you say, all right, I am going to write 1 page a day. So that's a manageable goal. What's really important is not only set the manageable goals for yourself, but also, please note, write this down, set milestones within that goal. So there's a lot of research coming out of, for example, Stanford University, that setting milestones for yourself and acknowledging that you've reached a milestone is one of the key elements to the success of your goal. The reason for that is the following. Let's say you have the 1 page of the report to write, and there are 4 paragraphs per page. Once you come to the end of a paragraph and you put that period there and you start a new paragraph, if you recognize that as a milestone, your brain will release dopamine. And the effect of the dopamine is that it will suppress the adrenaline and noradrenaline that comes up with the stress of having to achieve a goal. And it will create a buffer where you have just your normal level of sort of confidence and energy. And it will also release more energy to get to the next milestone. So if the goal seems really hard and out of reach, break it down into milestones, and your brain will be able to recognize that those are even more manageable. And once you achieve them, you'll get the energy to go on to the next milestone. And by the end of the 4th paragraph, you might even discover that you have the energy and the motivation and the creativity to start a 2nd page. The same can be said for something even more mundane, like cleaning the bathroom. You go, this is not my favorite task. It must be done. I receive clients at home now, coaching clients at home. And so every Tuesday or Thursday, there's this mad rush to get that bathroom clean. And you can see every station of the bathroom as a milestone. Okay, so you get your bathtub, your sink, toilet, floor. Each one of those is a milestone in the goal of getting your bathroom clean. So you scrub out the bathroom, milestone 1. It's the sink, milestone 2, toilet, milestone 3, floor, bath. You come out, you're like, I am someone who gets things done, and this is great. And there's that boost in confidence and well-being, also all the better with which to receive clients. So that's technique number 4, set goals and milestones on a regular basis. Technique number 5. Technique number 5 is to nurture your positive relationships. Despite the emphasis that we have these days on individuality, human beings are hardwired for connection. We are hardwired to live in community, and to live, let's say, isolated the way we do is an enormous stress on our psychological system. Nurturing your positive relationships means that you recognize you're embedded in a community or network that supports and sustains you. The African-American writer Maya Angelou gave a great speech once. I think it was a commencement speech, and you can find it on YouTube. It's called Bring Your Ancestors With You. And the idea there is when you go into an interview, into a big meeting, into a presentation, don't go alone. Bring your parents with you in your mind. Okay, not literally. It'd be weird if you brought your parents to an interview. Bring your parents with you, bring your grandmother with you, your auntie with you, your best friends with you, and recognize that you're there not alone, but with this system that you are deeply embedded with. And this also will boost your self-confidence. And what's great about having that kind of self-confidence when you go into a meeting is that with our mirror neurons, your interlocutor, the person you're speaking with, will respond to that aura you're giving off of being within that network. And they themselves will feel uplifted by you feeling uplifted. So it's a win-win situation. It's win-win-win-win situation because you will make a good impression. The person you're speaking to will be impressed with you, and they will feel better being in your presence. So on that note, now I've given you the 5 techniques. I also want to give you a couple of coaching hacks to take away from this webinar. There's a grounding exercise that is really just meant to calm your nerves and to bring you back into presence with yourself and be able to cultivate that sense of I'm not alone. So what you do here, now follow me, please. It's going to take a moment. You can do this sitting or standing. I'm going to do the demo with you sitting. If we were in person, I would show it to you standing. There's very little difference. But the first thing you do is you put both feet on the floor. So if you're sitting, of course, that might be more conscious. If you're standing, I hope you have both feet on the floor. If you're sitting, your legs might be crossed, so you might not realize it. Put them on the floor and just feel your feet on the floor. Feel the bottom of your feet, even through the shoes, touching the floor. If you're standing, I would say loosen the knees. Sitting, as most of us probably are, I would say sit up straight, not rigid, but just straight and comfortable. Put your hand on your stomach. Yeah, so there's this embodiment to feel the center of your being. You take a deep breath in, release, and as you exhale, say ah. And with eyes closed or eyes open, think of the face of someone you love. I'm seeing some smiling faces here. Now, what's great about this exercise is that it reminds you that you're not alone, that you're connected with at least someone. The reason I say think of the face of someone you love, it should be someone that you have a positive love relationship with, okay, that I won't go into any further detail. And the reason I say think of the face is that relationships are complicated. You might have you might be going through a tense time with someone that you really care about, and you'd want to bracket that out for the duration of this exercise and just think of the person, think of the love that you have for that person. Now, the second coaching hack I want to share with you, I call it the Tony Robbins confidence pose. I learned it from Tony Robbins. Yeah, Anita, I learned it from Tony Robbins, but he did not invent it. And it was a woman who invented it, and her name escapes me at the moment. But the confidence pose, there's a way of standing. There is a way of standing that will increase your testosterone by 20%. And testosterone, if you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter, no difference. Or if you're non-binary, same thing. Testosterone is the magic ingredient in self-confidence. So what you do, and maybe I'll go to screen share because I have all these slides that as usual I didn't use. But there you go. These are the poses. You either put your hands on your hips. You do the standing is better. Now you could the pose is supposed to last 2 minutes. So I strongly suggest you get a private place to do this because people might look at you funny if you don't. You put your hands on your hips. You stand with your feet relatively, wide apart, not excessively, but not together either. And you keep your chin in the air for 2 minutes, like this. Or you can put your hands behind your head like this for 2 minutes. And you can feel the energy in your body change. So that's a really great exercise to do if you have something important coming up, especially like an interview or a meeting where you really need that self-confidence to be at the best it can be. Go for that. Okay, I'm gonna stop the screen share. I think you've gotten the picture, right? You can all master that. Stop share. I have this red button. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna cut them all off. So you're still here. That's great. Now, earlier, before we talked about the 5 techniques, I asked you to think of a number from 1 to 5. So I'm going to go back to screen share. I'm going to show you again the 5 techniques. You don't have to tell me which number you chose because it's sort of random. You had no idea that these numbers were coming up. But can you write to me in the chat, in a scale of 1 to 10, what is the likelihood that you will implement the technique that you chose, the number? Let's say in the next 7 days, what is the likelihood that you will implement this technique? Be the arbiter of who you are, set boundaries, generosity, goals and milestones. Here we go. And nurture positive relationships. Woo! Karen, you had 9 and Sarah 8. Great. Another 8. Fantastic. That's good. Now tell me, what is the likelihood that you will implement all 5 of these techniques? Okay, 7, I'd like to try. I only lack the one I have picked. Okay, well, now you know what you have to do. Anyone else? Okay, great. So you'll try to do all of them, and I'll be sending you these files, by the way. So that is a good way for me sorry about that. To transition from telling you all about these techniques and then showing you the coaching hacks. If you do all of this stuff from what I've taught you in the webinar, you will have enough to really start practicing on a daily basis how to strengthen your self-confidence. I also want to tell you about the coaching program that I've devised that really works in a lot of ways to get in touch with your authentic self. And being in touch with your authentic self and feeling empowered in it is a way to boost your self-confidence. And so what I've devised are all ways to get in touch with it, to get clarity about yourself. This is who I am. This is what I value. This is what I have to offer. And then to create strategies for practicing that in the real world, practicing it in the real world, and then coming back and reflecting on what happened in the coaching space to really fine-tune the growth that you want to make. So I have this program. It's 10 sessions. It's at the price of $2,250. For people who are attending this webinar, I have also a special bonus. And just so you know, it can be applicable to you if you write and you say, I want to do this coaching program. And I'm also making it available to any friends. So if you recommend me to a friend and they contact me with a special code that I will tell you at the end, they could get also not only the coaching program, but also the bonus. And the bonus is the following. So during the coaching program that I offer, I'm available by text or by email between sessions so that, my clients always feel supported. If little things come up and they need to touch base with me as their coach, they can do that anytime. Nothing too mammoth in between the sessions, but just to know that I'm still there and I've still got their back. But then the coaching program ends and they go out into the real world. For the year following the coaching program, the bonus is I offer 5 free 15-minute phone calls that can be made either before an important event, so they get a kind of pep talk or prep talk to help them strengthen their self-confidence, restabilize their self-confidence, just to check out any areas that they might have overlooked to really get the best out of the upcoming event. And it will, of course, be fine-tuned to the client since we had this coaching program already. So that's one option for the free 15-minute call. Can be either the prep talk, or it can also be a 15-minute postmortem. You went to an important event, it went sideways, you did not get the results you wanted, and now you want to figure out why. And that talk with a coach can be really helpful, again, because as a coach, I know what you went through. I know those little small details that, the book of the 5 Atomic Habits of Successful People won't know. So we will really have a conversation tailored to who you are to get to the bottom of what did not go well and how you can improve for the next time. So if you're interested, or if anyone you know is interested, you can contact me by email or through LinkedIn, whatever it is, and you can say coaching program/webinar. And this will be available for you. And we'll get on to a free discovery call because you might really love the offer, but first we have to see if the chemistry is right between you and me. And then we'll set up and move forward to the start of the program. And I just want to keep in mind that really life gets so much better when you can act with self-confidence. Possibilities open, doors open. And although I don't talk about self-esteem in this context, very often when you have a success in an area that requires self-confidence, it reverberates deep into your self-esteem as well. So it's a win-win, I think. And I would be super, super happy to talk about anything more that is on your mind.